Cadences allow you to streamline a series of client engagements like emails or phone calls to a targeted group of clients. To start creating a new cadence, you can click on Create Cadence. However, in this example, because I already have a cadence created, I'm going to clone that one so that I don't have to start from scratch. The first step of creating a new cadence is to determine the cadence flow. In this example, step 1, which happens on day 1, is to notify clients about an upcoming product seminar. And as you can see under the type, this is an automated email. So whenever the recipient reaches this step, an automated email will be sent out. Second, if you already have an email template you want to utilize, you can utilize them by clicking on the dropdown and applying the email template that you want to use. Third, you can enter in the contents of the email like the subject title and the email body. This is the exact same experience as you saw in email templates, so if you want to learn more about this, please feel free to refer to the email templates video. Finally, you can determine when this step will execute. If I want this automated email to send 1 day after the recipient has been added to a cadence, I can simply type 1 day. In this example, once the recipient has been added, 1 day after at 10 a.m., this automated email will send out. Now that I'm done creating step 1, I can click Apply Changes. Specifically with automated emails, we have something called a follow-up. Follow-up allows you to send a follow-up email based on the conditions of the parent email. For example, maybe the recipient didn't open the email after a certain period of time, or they clicked on a specific link within the email. In this case, the condition is that the email has not been opened. Just like the parent email, you can utilize email templates and enter in the subject title and the email body. If you want the follow-up email to send in a new email thread, you can make sure that this checkbox is checked. You can also determine when the follow-up email should send. So if I set it to 1 day at 10 a.m., this means that 1 day after at 10 a.m. of the parent email sending, I want to check whether or not this condition has been met or not met. If the condition has been met, for example, the parent email has not been opened 1 day after at 10 a.m., the follow-up email will send. Now that I'm finished drafting up the follow-up email, I can click Apply Changes. Next step in the cadence flow is to make a phone call to a recipient to validate their attendance. You can see that the type is set to a phone call task. This means that when the recipient reaches step 2, a phone call task will be created in Salesforce as a Salesforce task or in Outlook as an Outlook task, depending on if I have Salesforce integration enabled. Priority is a field that is available within the Salesforce's task object. And this just determines how important the task is. The 3 default values that the task object provides for a priority field is low, normal, or high. And again, you can determine what the title of the task is, as well as add some description. Maybe you want to add a phone call script. Next, you determine when the due date of this task is. In this example, the due date of this task is 2 days after at 10 a.m. of the previous step's email being sent out. Normally, as soon as the due date is reached, the recipient will move on to step 3. However, if I want to move the recipient forward to the next step only when the task is marked as complete in Salesforce or Outlook, I can make sure that this checkbox is checked. Furthermore, task objects contain something called an outcome. An example of an outcome is maybe I made a phone call, so the task is complete, but the outcome of the phone call was that the client was not interested. So if I want to remove the recipient from a cadence based on a certain outcome, I can make sure that this checkbox is checked and I can select the appropriate outcome. So in this example, if the recipient is not interested, the recipient will be removed from the cadence. For now, I will keep this checkbox unchecked. The final step in the cadence flow is to send a thank you for attending email. Note that the type is an automated email. And again, just like in step 1, you can utilize email templates or draft the email from scratch. And again, you can determine when this step will execute. Now that I'm done drafting the email, I can click Apply Changes. The second step in the Cadence flow is to add recipients to Cadence. In this example, because I've cloned this Cadence, you can see that there's already recipients added for me. However, let me delete all the recipients and start from scratch. Before I add recipients to a Cadence, note that this step is optional and I can add them once I've published the Cadence. There's 3 different ways of adding recipients. The first way is to add them manually by manually entering in their email, first name, last name, and any other merge field details. The recipient owner dictates who the owner of the recipient should be. Any emails that are sent out to the recipient will be using the recipient owner's mailbox, and any tasks that are created for the recipient will be created in the recipient owner's Salesforce account or Outlook account, depending on if Salesforce integration is enabled. Depending on whether or not delegation is enabled, depending on if delegation is enabled and I have the necessary delegate permissions to delegate another user, I can set others as a recipient owner as well. The second way is to import recipients in bulk via a CSV file. When I open up this model, you can see that a CSV file has been generated for me. This is an empty CSV file just to dictate what the format of the CSV should be, so that Riva is able to correctly parse the recipients that are in the CSV file. Let me upload a CSV file with 50 contacts as an example. My mistake, it seems like there's only 49 recipients in that CSV file, but you can see that those people were added here. If any of these recipients were missing a merge field value, they would show up in an error state. And although you can move on with publishing your Cadence, the recipient will not move through the Cadence until those errors have been resolved. So for example, maybe Donna is missing a phone call merge field. For any recipient who is currently not a contact in Salesforce, they'll have a warning, and you have the option to save and update that contact in Salesforce if you wish to. The final way of adding recipients is by retrieving them from Salesforce. This allows me to search all contacts and leads. I also have the option to look at different list views that have been created for me. In this example, let's take a look at the list view called Toronto Region. If I want to further filter down, I can also search based on certain field values. For example, let me try to search for contacts that have the word Riva in their email. I can either select these recipients individually, or I can also select them in bulk. And you can see that there are a couple people with duplicate email or missing emails who can't be added, but I still have the option to add all the other recipients. Now that I've finished adding recipients for this Cadence, I'll move on to the final step. Additional options just allows me to set some important settings for this Cadence. First, I can determine what the name of this Cadence is. Next, I can decide whether or not I want to exclude recipients from a Cadence when the send failed. For example, maybe the email bounced, and at that point, I don't want to continue to send an email to an email that does not even exist. Next, I can choose to exclude recipients from a Cadence if they replied, because at that point, perhaps maybe I want to make a more personalized approach rather than continue to send them templatized emails. Finally, if I want to make sure that the email engagement information, like whether or not it was opened, bounced, replied, is synced over to Salesforce, you just need to make sure that this checkbox is checked. And this enables the analytics and reporting teams to leverage this data directly from Salesforce. And this concludes the creation of a Cadence, and I'll click Publish when I'm ready.